My stepbrother insisted that I leave the house during my stepfather's burial, believing it was his. Until the will revealed otherwise. 38-year-old Jake never imagined I would be getting ready for the burial of my stepfather. Memories sweep back like a tidal wave as I sit here organizing old pictures and planning. Death seems to cause one to consider a lifetime of events, both positive and negative. At 9 years old, my mother Sarah married Richard, my stepfather. The wedding day seems to me like yesterday. Mom looked lovely in her basic white outfit, hope beaming in her eyes for a fresh start. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to be stressing his austere attitude by wearing a black suit. Even on what ought to have been a happy occasion, he insisted on a solemn demeanor that I would come to know all too well over the years. Richard was a rigid man right from the beginning. Particularly when he turned to face me, he always seemed to be permanently frowning. Often I questioned whether he simply had the means to relate to a child who wasn't his own or if he harbored resentment at having to assume the position of stepfather. Growing up with Richard was not easy. From my grades to my wardrobe to even how I handled my fork at meals, he attacked everything I did. "You need to work harder, or this cruel world will chew you up and spit you out," he said almost daily. Looking back, I wonder if Dad was attempting to equip me for life in his own flawed manner. Even if at the time I believed he was just being nasty. His rigidity permeated every sphere of our life. I had to sit up straight, use the proper fork, and only spoke when spoken to during family get-togethers. Any departure from his expectations was greeted with a stinging stare or a harsh correction. Family vacations, which ought to have been light-hearted and leisureful, were more like military drills than pleasure excursions. Richard would schedule everything down to the last minute, heaven help us should we stray from the plan. One vacation I recall we missed a turn and arrived at a museum 15 minutes late. For the rest of the day Richard was in a terrible mood, grumbling about lost time and inadequate preparation. Everything changed 3 years following the wedding when my stepbrother Michael was born. Richard suddenly had his own son, and it was obviously clear whose favorite was. He poured love and compliments on Michael. Richard's smile was unlike anything I'd seen till he held his newborn kid. It revealed a part of Richard I never knew existed, like a switch had been turned on. I was envious and furious. When I was 12 years old, I couldn't comprehend why Michael received all the love and attention while I just got harsh looks and criticism. The difference was clear and agonizing. Michael's achievements, no matter little, were honored with great celebration. Even if they were notable, my own successes were greeted with a nod and a remark on how I can improve next time. Mom would try to reassure me when I protested to her about the unfair treatment. "Richard loves you too, Jake," she would say, her eyes begging me to understand. "That's just rough love. He wants you ready for the world." Still, it didn't feel like love to me. It seemed like continual disappointment as Richard saw me always failing. Our family dynamic changed in ways I never would have predicted throughout the years. Mom became ill at 25, and we all gathered around her. Richard stayed stoic even then, but I sensed compassion when he felt nobody else was looking. When Mom thought I wasn't in the room, I would observe him softly changing her pillows or crutching her hand. It was the first time I understood that Richard's lack of affection could have been more a result of his personal constraints than of his sentiments for us. 2 years later Mom passed away, and it felt as though the glue keeping our family intact had broken. Tears and quiet prayers defined the funeral. Richard stood like a monument all through the service, his face a blank mask. Though the wall between us seemed insurmountable, I wanted to get in touch with him to express our loss. Then 21 Michael left soon after Mom passed away. He launched his own family after tying the knot with Emma, his high school sweetheart. It was only me and Richard in that large mansion loaded with memories suddenly. I gave moving out some thought as well, but something held me back. Perhaps it was a feeling of obligation, or perhaps deep down I was still that small boy yearning some indication of approval from the guy who had been my father figure for most of my life. Looking after Richard in his latter years was difficult. Fighting the restrictions his aging body placed on him, he was as tenacious and critical as always. There were days when our conflict was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But occasionally too I felt short sparks of thanks in his eyes. Like the time I stayed up all night with him during a sick attack, or when I learnt to make his preferred foods as he grew too frail to stand at the stove himself. Those were uncommon events though, and most of the time I felt as though I was looking after a stranger who happened to live in my house. We were living in a tense truce, neither of us entirely sure how to close the distance that had widened between us over years. Richard's character made me never even consider entering a relationship or getting married. I wanted none of the same issues I was experiencing from my wife or girlfriend to confront. Richard's gone at 65, taken unexpectedly in the evening from a heart attack. Everyone is showing their respect as I get ready for his burial. Michael arrived with Emma and their children, Lily 5 years old and Max 3 years old. I hadn't seen him in years until now. Though he seems older and more austere, I recall from our early years that he exudes entitlement about everything. The funeral was a depressing event. I stood there listening to people talk about Richard, a fantastic man who always placed family first, a pillar of the community, and I wanted to find fun in the irony of it all. Knowing the same man I did they? To me, the Richard they described seemed to be a stranger. Michael drew me aside as folks were departing once it was all over. I considered that perhaps he wished to assist each other in our sadness, to reconnect, or to share memories of our childhood. Rather, he delivered a startling blow that left me whirling. "So, about the house," he said. His voice laid back as though we were talking about the temperature. "I'll need you to leave by the end of the month." "Not sure," I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" He groaned and cast an intentionally obtuse glance at me. "Clearly, the house. Dad turned it over to me. Ultimately, I am his genuine son. You never imagined he would leave it to you?" I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. This was how it turned out all these years of trying to be the son Richard wanted and of looking after him. Part of me wanted to fight for what I felt I had earned over years of conscientious living. But another side of me, the one still feeling like that 9-year-old lad yearning for affirmation, wanted to withdraw. "Fine," I answered, my voice empty. "I'll be out by the end of the month." Not only for Richard, but for the family I never really had, for the bond I had always hoped would grow between Richard and me but never did, as I watched Michael walk away arm around Emma, kids running ahead. That evening I began packing among boxes of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to save. Sorting through years of accumulated belongings, I couldn't help but wonder whether Richard had been right all along. Sometimes you still ended up with nothing to show for it. The world was harsh. Update: I sold out of my childhood house a week ago. For now, Mom's sister Linda is here with me trying to decide what to do next. Thinking about Michael and how we got here, I lie awake at night staring at the foreign ceiling. Michael obviously was the preferred child growing up. Richard doted on him in a way he never did with me from the time he was born. Birthday celebrations with all his friends invited, new toys just because, please smiles when he brought home a good report card, all things I had longed for but never received. I recall one birthday Michael was around 8 years old. Richard hired a whole arcade for his buddies and himself. At the time, I was 17 and couldn't help but contrast it with my own birthdays, which often featured a quiet meal and perhaps a small gift. But Michael aged and something changed. The sweet little lad who used to follow me about wanting to play developed into a depressed adolescent who appeared to hate everything and everyone. He started to treat me like I was invisible and spoke angrily back to our parents. It was like seeing a stranger seize my little brother's body. One specific occasion comes to mind when he was around 16. Richard asked us about his marks when we were having dinner. Richard asked us both this kind of inquiry all the time. It was a regular one. Michael burst this time though. He began screaming about how he despised living under Richard's control and how sick he felt of the pressure. He bolted from the house, slamming the door so fiercely a picture fell from the wall. Richard seemed to be sitting there, looking older and sadder than I had ever seen him. Instead of the angry man I had anticipated to pursue Michael and drag back. Michael's behavior just became worse as he grew older. He began courting a series of girls, each relationship ending hazily. Late nights, missing curfews, and shouting battles with Richard that rocked the home abound. I tried to keep out of it, but the continual stress would inevitably affect me. Michael laughed it off when Richard tried to discuss respect and duty. "You can't control me anymore," he would say, and Richard would get this expression, a mix of wrath and despair, that I had never seen before. Then arrived the day he turned up with Emma as his bride. Not even among us knew he was seeing someone seriously, let alone getting ready for marriage. Walking in with Emma, little more than a teenage herself, he said they had eloped. I shall never forget Richard's expression. For once, he was silent. Mom tried to calm things down and welcome Emma into the family, but the air was clearly charged. Richard seemed to be straining to keep his cool and to find the proper words to speak to his kid. Emma claimed she wanted to live free from family meddling, apart. Michael thus packed his luggage and left, simply as that. He pledged to visit and keep in touch, but those pledges soon dropped off the list. Weeks became months devoid of his communication. His calls were always quick and often tinged with conflict. I assumed definitely he would come back when Mom fell ill, but he did not. He asked her periodically how she was doing, but always had a reason for why he couldn't visit. Work was hectic, the kids were sick, the car was in the shop. Something was always there. Hoping it would be Michael, I recall sitting next Mom's hospital bed and seeing her eyes flash every time the phone rang. More usually than not, it wasn't. It was me who had to phone Mom to let her know she died. He sounded very offended, full of regret for not visiting more frequently. He claimed he would try to make it to the funeral, but ultimately he did not show up, just a flower arrangement delivered to the funeral house accompanied by a card offering his sympathies. Feeling his absence like a physical hurt, I stood at the burial wondering how we had become so far apart. And right now here we are. Not motivated by love or obligation, the prodigal son returns for what he can gain. Thinking about how he swooped in and grabbed the house, acting as though he had some right to do so when he had left us years earlier, makes me enraged. I consider all the evenings I spent seeing to Richard, all the doctor's visits I accompanied, all the meals I made, and all the expenses I paid. And for what? To be thrown aside just like I never really mattered at all. But my phone calls as I'm staggered in these terrible ideas. It is Mr. Thompson, Richard's attorney. Telling me he has to talk about something vital, he sounds serious and asks me to come back to the house tomorrow. Uncertain on what to believe. Part of me hopes there's a mistake and maybe I won't have to abandon my house after all. Knowing how let down I have been in the past, another side of me is terrified to hope. I wonder what tomorrow will hold as I hang up the phone. Whatever it is, I am clear one thing. This is not going to be easy. I toss and turn the remainder of the night, my head ablaze with possibilities. Something so crucial that Mr. Thompson had to see me personally. Richard left something for me after all. Is it conceivable? Alternatively, is this only another letdown in a long run of disappointments? Feeling like a stranger, I stood before my childhood house the next day. To my astonishment, Michael's car was also in the driveway already. Breathing deeply, I entered. The familiar creak of the front door sent a pulse through me. Sitting at the dining room table, Mr. Thompson had a stack of documents before him. There were Michael and Emma as well, clearly agitated. With his demeanor unreadable, the attorney motioned for me to sit down. Seated, well aware of the tension in the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said with a firm businesslike voice. "I know this is a tough period, but there are some crucial issues about Richard's will we should talk about." Michael slanted forward, a smug grin on his face. "Let's wrap this up. I would want to start right away as I have plans for this home." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, seeming uncomfortable. "We should really talk about that. Richard's will states that Jake has been left the house and in fact all of his possessions." The room went still for a time. I felt as though I couldn't breathe. Had I heard him precisely? After all these years of believing I was never good enough, Richard had left everything to me. The first to react was Michael. "What?" he yelled, leaping to his feet so fast his chair dropped backwards. "That's not possible. Real son of his father is me. He wouldn't hand everything to Jake." Mr. Thompson stayed cool under Michael's rage. "I'm rather worried it's rather obvious. Richard's will specifically says that Jake is to inherit all of his possessions, including the house, his savings, and his personal items." What I was hearing defied belief. It seemed illogical. Those years of criticism, of feeling as though I could never measure up, and now this. Michael was pacing now, his face flushed with rage. "This is nuts. When he composed this, he must have been insane. I'll dispute it. I'll bring this before court." Mr. Thompson gave a headshake. "That is not what I would counsel. Richard prepared this will rather carefully. He included a letter outlining his choice and had it attested and notarized. Challenging effectively would be quite difficult." Michael turned to face me, his eyes flaming with resentment. "You did this, did not you? You somehow twisted him against me." Still in disbelief personally, I raised my hands. "About any of this I knew nothing. I assumed he was forwarding everything to you." Before things could get much more heated, Mr. Thompson stepped in. "If I may, I think Richard's letter might help to clarify his choice." Pulling out an envelope, he started to read. To his sons, "Should you be reading this, I am gone. Though I hope I can clarify, I know your two may find my choice shocking. I have made lots of mistakes over my life. Among my largest was not treating both of my sons equally in terms of love. I expected too much from Jake, was too demanding, never showed enough affection. And I treated Michael too kindly. I never set appropriate limits or imparted any lessons of value. As I considered my life in my last years, I came to see something crucial. A real son is defined by behavior rather than blood. And in that sense, Jake behaved as a real son ought to. He stayed with me through trying circumstances and looked after me even when I didn't deserve it. All the traits I attempted to teach but failed to show myself, patience, kindness and responsibility, he exhibited. I am so leaving everything to him, not as a punishment to Michael but rather as a tribute to the kid who really embodied the ideals I cherish. I hope you both have the compassion to see and pardon the errors of an elderly guy." The room went still once Mr. Thompson closed his book. Tears came to me, a lifetime of feelings rising inside me. All those years I felt Richard didn't care, that he considered me a disappointment. But he had been observing, noting, valuing in his own unique sense. Michael froze momentarily, his face a mask of shock and rage. Then he silently seized Emma's hand, rushed out, slammed the door behind him. His automobile started up and ran out of the driveway. The last act of disobedience was a tire screech. Turning to me, Mr. Thompson wore a gentle grin. "I know this is a lot to absorb, Jake," he continued. "Richard expressed his preferences quite precisely. He wished for you a safe future free from financial concerns." I nodded, still not sure I understood exactly what had transpired. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I need some time to consider all this." Mr. Thompson stopped as he neatly folded his documents. "There is still one more item. Your stepfather left you a personal note as well." "You read it in private?" he questioned. He gave me an envelope with my name written in Richard's recognizable handwriting on it. I took it knowing that within our words I had waited a lifetime to hear with shaky hands. I sat by myself in the quiet house flipping the envelope in my hands after Mr. Thompson departed. At last I plucked the will to open it and read. "Jake dear, though I know I've never been excellent at communicating my emotions, hopefully this letter will help to offset some of my faults. I'm glad of the man you have evolved into. Though I failed as a parent, I had a challenging upbringing and never taught appropriate affectionate behavior. I reasoned that the best way to equip you for life was to be rigorous and challenge you. I regret the suffering I caused you. Now I understand I was mistaken. Particularly in these last several years, your compassion and commitment have shown me what actual strength and integrity look like. You now more than ever reflect the guy I always dreamed you would be. I apologize for not telling you these things when I was living. With my last wishes and this letter, maybe, you will have some peace and protection. Remember yourself, son. You are deserving of all the joy available. Love, Richard." Tears came down my face as I closed the book. All those years of feeling inadequate, of thinking Richard didn't care, and now this was overpowering. Over the next days I battled to make sense of everything. Once a cause of stress and bad memories, the house felt different now. It belonged to me, in a deeper sense as much as legally. It was evidence of Richard's affection, sincere if spoken too late. Michael hasn't gotten in touch since he departed that day. Not sure whether he will. Though I know it will take time, part of me hopes we can reconcile someday. The pain is still raw, and our distance seems more than it did years ago. I have given family, the complexity of love and the numerous ways people show it a lot of thought. Though often harsh, Richard's love was sincere. It was flawed. In his own sense, he was working to equip me for life and build my resilience. Though I wish he could have discovered a softer approach, I now better understand him. Regarding inheritance, it goes beyond just money and real estate. One has responsibility. Richard trusted me to continue on his legacy and to live the ideals he loved. Although it's a difficult work, I'm resolved to meet expectations. I have chosen to create a scholarship fund in Richard's name from a portion of the bequest. It's for children from difficult situations so they may have the education and chances they might otherwise miss. Taking the teachings he imparted on me and paying them forward seems like the proper approach to honor his memory. I'm still trying to make sense of everything as I sit here now in the house that turned unexpectedly into mine. Fathers and sons have a complex relationship marked by frequently unsaid feelings and misunderstandings. Richard and I never had the relationship I wanted when he was alive, but his last act has given me an opportunity to better know him, to see the love always there, buried under the surface. I wish Dad had told me these things during his lifetime. We could have had talks, cleared the air, perhaps even created the relationship I so yearned for. But life does not always provide us tidy ends or flawless closure. Right now, I'm concentrating on respecting Richard's memory by practicing the ideals he sought to inculcate in me. Work hard, be conscientious, and most importantly, love those who matter. I'm glad to be carrying on a legacy. Looking ahead, I experience a range of emotions: sadness for what was lost, thankfulness for what I have, and hope for what is to come. Richard's unexpected legacy has given me a fresh perspective of family, love and forgiveness in addition to financial stability. Though I never expected it, this is a new chapter in my life and I am ready to face it, bearing with me the lessons of the past and hope for a better future. That might ultimately be the best inheritance of all. My mom wants me to marry my creepy stepbrother and have his child. She now harasses me at work and lies about the inheritance. I, 29F, have an older stepbrother, Chris, 42M, who has been a nightmare since the day my mom married his dad. Let me give a bit of background. Our parents married when I was 4 and he was 17. Both our parents were widowed. After their wedding, we moved to the US since my mom had American citizenship through marriage. I was born in the US too, but after my dad died when I was 1, my mom and I moved back to Colombia. My stepdad got his residency through marriage, and my stepbrother, because he was a minor, wasn't a big fan of me. My only memories of him are just constant bullying. He would be left in charge of me since he was studying locally and lived with my parents. But mostly, his babysitting really meant things like locking me in the guest bathroom or the shed outside. He would steal my lunchbox whenever he was the one who dropped me off at school. He even began to harm my pets. I have an old cat that has been with me for almost 22 years. He tried more than once to run her over with his car. My parents never believed any of it. He's the classic golden child. My mom absolutely wanted a son instead of a daughter, so my stepbrother took priority over me. The bullying just kept getting worse and creepier. He had this long key for the bathroom. The door was designed so that if it got locked by accident, one could open it by inserting a long stick or key through a small hole on the outside. He would use it to walk in on me showering. My underwear would disappear sometimes, and I know for a fact it was him. He also started taking pictures of me sleeping. One night, I woke up to him taking care of himself next to me while I slept. I yelled, obviously. My parents came over, but he wasn't in trouble. I was, for tempting him. I was 14 when this happened. He was 27. No one helped me, and he got bolder until he did something I am still in therapy for. When I was 16, it got to a point where I called my biological half-brother, Sam, 48M, and son of my biological father's first wife, to see if I could live with him and his wife, Sandy, during my last 2 years of high school. When Sam found out what was going on, he confronted my mom. My mom didn't care and just told him to take me, as long as he never asked her for money. Done and done. My brother and his wife became my legal guardians and took me in with my cat and the old family dog since I didn't trust leaving any living creature with Chris around. My parents never checked on me. My extended family from my father's side knew what happened and immediately got together to ensure I could finish school well and go to college. I don't know my maternal family at all. Thanks to my paternal family, including Sam's mother and her family, I got my bachelor's and master's with no student debt and work as a nurse practitioner. I still live with Sam, his wife and their 2 kids, and I pay a small rent. Neither Sam nor his wife expected me to pay anything. But that's the least I can do for the 2 people who have taken care of me for 13 years. For anyone wondering why I didn't move, it's incredibly expensive where I live and Sam insisted I stay with them until I save enough to buy my own home. Things seemed okay until my mom messaged me recently. She had not messaged me since I was 18, when she told me she no longer had any responsibility for me. In this message, she sounded overly friendly, telling me how she missed me and asking how I was doing. I was a bit creeped out but decided to be nice, telling her about what I had done since leaving her care. She seemed very interested, as apparently, she knew I was a nurse but not what kind I was. She began asking me about my salary. I didn't tell her anything about it, except that it was enough to pay the bills. My mom then began texting about Chris and how he was barely making any money due to his student debt. Apparently, Chris never finished a degree, jumping from career to career. He is now working in my stepdad's used car business as a salesman, but most of his pay goes toward his substantial student debt accumulated over the years. I told my mom how sorry I was that Chris was having a hard time and wished him luck. That's when my mom finally got to what she wanted. She texted me that I needed to pay his student debt so he could finally begin to make the money he deserves, like the man of the family. I just turned off my phone. When I got home, Sam was surprised since I was usually the last to arrive. Sandy wasn't home yet. I told Sam what happened and showed him my mom's text messages. I don't think I've seen Sam this angry ever. He told me to block my mom, stepdad and Chris if I hadn't done so yet. After talking with Sam and Sandy, I called my boss to ask for the next day and the one after off. This gave me a 4-day weekend, including the days I'm normally off shift. My boss was more than okay with this and told me to just take it easy and let her know if she could help. This backfired because the next day, my mom and Chris decided to come to Sam's house to speak to me. I was alone since Sam and Sandy were at work and the kids were at school. I immediately called Sam and told him what was going on. He told me not to open the door and that he was on his way. My mom spent the whole time screaming that I owed them for raising me and that my sweet brother deserved the money. Chris was going around trying to find a window or door unlocked. There weren't any, since the windows have safety bars and the only other doors are in the closed garage and one in the yard. The yard door was locked, and just in case, I locked the one in the garage. I won't post what he called me when he saw me from one of the windows, but basically, He told me they should have thrown me away when I was a baby since I grew to be a burden. He pounded on one of the windows so hard that he cracked the glass. Eventually, he gave up and went back to the front door, clearly trying to kick it down. I didn't have anything to worry about. The door was a security door, but I was still very scared. Between yelling, threatening, pleading and insults, I finally heard Sam screaming at them to get lost. I only saw things from the window. Sam pretty much dragged them both off the porch. They got to a point I couldn't hear, but I saw my mom and Chris looking pale and scared before they ran to their car and drove off way past the legal speed limit. Sam came in a bit later and immediately went into full protective brother mode, asking me if I was okay. He kept saying sorry and hugging me. Sandy arrived almost immediately after and looked like she was about to commit a felony. Apparently, Sam threatened them with filing charges for what Chris did to me when I was 16. My brother's ace, my stepdad, was willing to testify against his own son. That seemed enough to get Chris off our backs, but not my mom. Since then, it's been 3 days, and my mom has sent texts, called non-stop from various numbers, and rallied a group of people who are supposedly my maternal family to harass me for money. She claims that the money should legally be hers since she's my mother, and that it's my late father's missed child support. Sam is helping me find a lawyer to get a restraining order on my mom, and I plan to take my stepdad's offer to testify by pressing charges against Chris. I can't say I can forgive him for not stopping his son, but I appreciate that he's at least trying. I don't know the details, but Chris did something to a relative of his dad, and since then, they had a really bad fallout. I took my boss's offer and will be on vacation for a few more days. But here it is. My vacation days are getting eaten up and my therapist might need a therapist after this. Thankfully, my dark sense of humor and supportive paternal family are keeping me somewhat sane. Update. I didn't think I would be making an update so soon, but my mother is unrelenting. To the people who were so kind and gave me advice earlier, thank you so much. It really helps to have people show kindness in difficult days. I followed the advice to freeze my credit and will be getting a new phone for personal use. I'll have to keep my old phone for work for a little while. Now, to update on the situation, we are going through with pressing charges and might pursue a civil lawsuit for 2 years of child support my mother owes. We are not sure yet of our chances, but my brother wants to go scorched earth. As for my mother, she began a new campaign. She's been posting false accusations about me, accusing my stepbrother Chris of sexual assault. She's also been accusing me of being a temptress who tried for years to sleep with my brother. She even got a few relatives, who I just found out are my aunts, to join in, claiming they were witnesses. I have never met these women in my life. My stepfather actually commented on her post, saying my mom was lying and accusing his own son of being a pedophile. That's how I found out about the big fallout between them. My stepbrother apparently went after one of my stepfather's nieces. I don't know the girl's age, but she has to be about my age if I'm thinking of the right person. If not, she's younger than me. A lot of my biological father's relatives have also taken to social media to call out my mother, saying she had always claimed she was an orphan and had no family, while now she suddenly has 3 sisters. It's a mess. I'm just watching for now and being a stay-at-home aunt. My nephews love it since we go out for crazy shenanigans after they finish their homework. My boss has helped me with some paperwork for a leave of absence, and I should be off for about 6 weeks. After that, I'll be mostly working from home for a few weeks. It's not the greatest update, and to be sincere, things are not fun, but it's nice to spend time with the kiddos at least. Also, I forgot to mention this. No, my mom is not likely sleeping with or in a relationship with my stepbrother, as some people had mentioned. My mom always wanted a son, and I was a disappointment because I was born a girl. She treats my brother like he's her real son, and I think she truly loves him as a mother. She made sure to tell me how disappointing it was for her when I was born. Update 2. I hope the title is okay for the rules. I was recommended to post here but wasn't sure where to start. My mother was widowed when I was 1 year old. My biological father was much older than her. She was his second wife, with a 20-plus year age difference. After that, she remarried her hometown sweetheart and adopted his 17-year-old son. My dad was American, and my mom is Colombian. I was born in the US, then we moved back to Colombia for a few years, and we returned to the US when I was 4. My whole life, my mother constantly complained about the fact that I was a girl. She would say things like, "If you were a boy, maybe we could have gotten more from your father." Or "Girls are so useless." All I was to her was the problem child. She took my inheritance and squandered it, mostly on things for my stepbrother. Whenever she had guests, she would always introduce me and joke about how I ruined her body and wasn't even worth it since I was a girl. Most of her friends thought I had some kind of mental illness because of her lies about me being mentally behind. She used the R word, and would often blame it on my gender, saying that because I was born a girl, I was clearly inferior. During holidays, I would be left behind with a sitter. I was just too much of a problem child and would ruin things for my sweet brother. We only have one family picture from when I was 5. If I got anything nice with my own money, my mother would take it from me. If it was something like makeup or clothes, she would say I wasn't attractive enough or worthy enough to have such nice things. I should just stick with a plain face since it would make it easier for me to find a job when I was done with high school. She had no intentions of letting me go to college. But the worst part is, she never protected me. My stepbrother is a predator. At first, he just bullied me, stealing my food and locking me in dark places. When I hit puberty though, he began to do worse things. Walking in on me when I showered, even if I locked the door. Stealing my underwear, watching me sleep. And he even sexually assaulted me when I was 16 and he was 29. My mother blamed it on me, saying I was tempting her poor sweet boy. I was saved by my biological half-brother and his wife. They took me in at 16, finished raising me, and put me through college with the help of my paternal family. Even my father's first wife pitched in and has always been kind to me. She's more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was. Now, I'm 29 years old, have a good career as a nurse practitioner, and I'm saving to buy my own home. My mother found out about this and has been demanding that I give her my money because she is my mother, and my money should be hers. She also demands that I pay off my abusive stepbrother's student loans. Since I refuse to comply with my dear mother's demands, she has now gone online to post that I'm a temptress trying to ruin her son's life and that I refuse to pay her back for all the care and love she supposedly gave me over the years. She even had some women, who are supposedly my aunts, join her in this. I've never met any of my maternal family. As far as I knew, my mother was an orphan. Now, I suddenly have 3 aunts who claim to have seen how bad a person I am. Update 3. This might be my last update about my mother and stepbrother since we're finally starting the legal fights, but I finally had a good laugh. In my previous posts, I haven't said much about my biological father. He died when I was 1 year old, so I never really met him. I have one picture of him holding me when I was an infant. I mostly know him from stories from his family. What I do know is that he was a man of means. He had a lot of assets that he carefully divided in his will, not so rich I'll never have to work rich, but just rich enough that I would be able to live comfortably as long as I worked and managed my finances well. I was not aware that he had made sure to leave me anything, and neither was my half-brother Sam, his son with his first wife. I'm the daughter of an affair partner turned second wife. My understanding was that anything I inherited was wasted by my mother to buy things for her predator stepson Chris, whom she prefers over me. He was my abuser growing up. In her words, daughters don't need inheritance, just marry a wealthy old man like me. Well, since my mother and Chris have been harassing me lately, we drove to my dad's lawyer to get some things we need from my dad's records for the lawsuit we are planning. He's a sweet older man who kind of looks like my dad a bit and was my dad's best friend. When we met, he received me with a hug and told me how happy he was to finally meet me. His wife was there too, and she also gave me a big hug and told me we needed to have dinner at their place. Once we all caught up, we discovered my mother had been faking receipts to get money from my trust. A lot of it, some of which was from when I was under Sam's guardianship. She's not the executor of my trust and had to provide receipts for anything. She's been sending receipts claiming they're for me because I'm still in medical school, even though I finished school in 2021. Well, her meal ticket not only got torn, but now she's in big trouble because this is fraud. And basically, my hands are tied about pressing charges. She claims me as a dependent on her taxes so my dad's lawyer would refund her for her expenses. He basically told me there's just no way we can keep this in civil court. He had to contact the IRS and the police. It doesn't help that she's been using my social security number for some things she shouldn't. Thank you to the people who advised me to freeze my credit. You guys saved me for sure. I probably won't be able to post for quite a while since I'm going to be incredibly busy. I'm just mentally exhausted from how much has happened. I wouldn't have done anything about my mom using my trust if she had left me alone. I wouldn't even know about it because the trust is set for me to take over with proof of marriage or graduation from college. Since I didn't know about it, I never sent the required paperwork to take control. She could have milked it dry if she left me alone and just kept sending fake information. I'm in the process of getting what's left of my trust. There's quite a bit in it and it should be enough for me to get a house or condo if I mix it with my savings and still have some left over to invest or do other things safely. I might wait for a while to buy anything though. I don't know how safe it would be since my mom still has my social security number. Update 4. Hey Reddit, this is more of a personal rant than a full-on update. Things are only starting on the legal side of things, so no real update or information I'm allowed to share. This is more on the personal side of things since I just came home from having my mother harass me in a bar. It was not fun. Short background. My mother is a greedy liar who let her stepson Chris, who's 13 years older than me, abuse me since I was a small child. First, it was physical abuse, then sexual abuse started when I was 14 until I was 16. Now she wants me to clear a student debt, and she has been mooching off my biological father's inheritance. As for last night, well, I decided to go out with some girlfriends for a girls' night. My half-brother Sam and his wife Sandy have been pushing me to go out for a while. We went to a local bar. I mostly stuck to the stools by the bar as I'm a massive introvert, but I like seeing my friends having fun. So I was simply drinking and talking to the bartender in passing. Well, my good mood was ruined when I noticed my mother, thankfully alone, walk towards me. The moment she saw me, she pretty much launched herself to hug me and began crying, saying how much she had missed me and how different I looked. I was trying really hard to get away from her, but she began causing a scene. She started begging for us to reconcile, saying that she was sorry I took my stepbrother's affection the wrong way, that they both love me and want me to live with them. She was loud, and people were looking at me. Some even looked sorry for her, and I had people encouraging me to hug my mom back. It was embarrassing and just so wrong. I just exploded and told her to leave me alone and walked out. That was even worse because she kept following me, with 2 or 3 randoms calling me a terrible daughter. She just kept swearing that Chris truly cares for me and wants us to be a family again. She even said that he found me so beautiful that he couldn't help himself when he sexually assaulted me. She said, when he made love to you. As if it was something consensual. I was a minor when he attacked me. He was almost 30. I just started crying and screaming at her to go away and leave me alone. Thankfully, one of my more sober friends called Sam, and he came over very fast. He scared away my mom and took me home. I'm now 100% sure I don't want to go out again. For people wondering why I never called the cops, I called the cops since I was 11 to report the abuse. I reported at 16 what he did to me. They took his side. I don't trust them. I truly believe cops don't care about sexual assault victims. I'm just writing this to get it out of my system. My therapist is unavailable, so Reddit is the next best thing. Update 5. Hey, been a bit, sorry for the radio silence. I had some people asking for updates, but things had been pretty quiet until this weekend so I had nothing to post. I know people usually do a recap app or something like that, so TLDR. My mother has always preferred my stepbrother Chris, who is 42. He was my abuser growing up. The abuse went from the time I was 11 to 16, when I moved in with my half-brother after the worst attack. I was recently tracked down by my mother, and she along with my stepbrother have been harassing me since. Currently, I'm in a legal fight against them to recover some stolen inheritance from my father and to resolve other matters. This weekend, once again, my mother decided to accost me at work. I was working from home, doing clerical work for the clinic I work at. I'm a nurse practitioner but took some clerical duties to be able to work from home when the mess with my mother and Chris began. Since then, the time I could work from home has ended, so I'm back in the clinic taking patients. For the most part, Saturday went well and quiet. Sunday, however, I noticed someone that shared my mother's name but not her last name. My mom has a very unique name, very old-sounding, and I've seen it only twice in my whole life. Of course, there's a big Latino community where I live, so I just assumed this was another person. We're from a Colombian family, though I was born in the US to an American father. Lo and behold, it was my mother using a fake last name. When I saw her, I immediately called my boss. She's aware of the situation and immediately went to ask my mother to please leave the premises. This can be a controversial move, so to explain it before the debate starts. She was in for a general checkup, not a life or death treatment. She was not denied because of protected reasons, but because I, as a member of staff, felt my life was in danger in her presence. There are a lot of other clinics with varying prices, and they are open to new patients, so she can get her checkup anywhere else. This is allowed under our state's law. If she was hyperventilating or clearly in distress, we would not have been able to ask her to leave. My mother, of course, went on a rampage demanding to be seen by me specifically. My boss, thankfully, was not intimidated and just insisted my mother had to leave or else the cops would be called. After a back and forth that I was watching from the security cameras, this all happened in our waiting room. My mother threw a letter at my boss and left fuming. She even pushed a lady that was walking in, though thankfully no one was hurt. My boss brought me the letter and told me she will make sure not to assign me any patients with my mother's first name and went to make arrangements with our front desk. I took a break and decided to read the letter, mostly to see if it was something I could use for my legal case. This is a translation to my best capabilities. My lovely daughter, it hurts me so much that you refuse to speak to me. I love you so much, and all I want is to recover the years we've lost. I only have you left from your father, whom I love dearly. I know there are a lot of misunderstandings with Chris. He loves you so much too, and I wish you would give him a chance to prove it to you. He always talked about how beautiful you are and how much he wished you two could spend more time together. He truly adores you, and I wish you would consider his feelings more. He even asked me to convince you to marry him, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Papa, your stepfather, and I are probably divorcing, and this will be the perfect solution so Chris, you and I can stay a family. He keeps going on and on about how much he wants to raise your and his baby together. Let me know when you want to go shopping for wedding dresses. I love you, my darling. Mom, I'm going to share a few personal notes here. I am unable to get pregnant. After Chris's attack, I had some medical complications that have left me unable to conceive. My mother knows about it. Chris knows about it. The cops know about it. They ruled the whole thing as consensual sex, and because I was 16, the legal age of consent, nothing was done. I showed this to my lawyer, and he added it to the compilation of things we're using for the legal case. Still no court date, and the cops don't consider my case risky enough to do the paperwork for a restraining order. I do have one officer who is taking this very seriously and has been amazing. It's just the majority who don't seem to care or have too much on their docket to give my case time. Update. I'm going to update here since it's only been 3 days and it feels dumb to make a new post. Chris has been arrested. Apparently, he kidnapped a 2-year-old baby girl. His cousin's daughter, no less. The baby was recovered safe and unharmed from what I heard. I'm glad she wasn't taken for long. Who knows what the hell he wanted to do to her. If I hear more details, I'll update. Arrogant boss fires expert, leading to £800K project disaster. Sweet revenge unfolds, but the story ends in tragedy. Who am I? Do you know? It backfires on an egotistical manager when a $800,000 project goes off course because he sacked an invaluable staff member. First of all, this never happened to me. I was with the individual when they got a call concerning this problem. Then he walked me through it all. He is not on Reddit, hence I am sharing it. It is valuable. Every name has been modified to guard corporate and personal identities. The plot depends much on listed structures. There is a mechanism in place in the UK for maintaining historic and significant constructions. A building deemed historically significant is referred to as a listed building. The guidelines for its evolution, preservation, and enhancement are rather rigorous. I have to be obscure about the labor involved. Else, it would be too simple to name the people engaged. David, a buddy of mine, is quite specialized in a very small field of building. Using a very ancient building technique not used for several millennia, he fixes and renovates buildings. His whole output focuses on listed buildings and conservation projects. Work needed on a Grade 1 listed property. ACC Limited, the major contractor, was handling the building generally. There is quite specific study on one aspect. The architect provided a list of suitable candidates as the contractor management knew no one who had done it. The contractors selected my friend since he was most available early on. 5 days into the project, the major contractor, ACC Limited, arrived on site. David's words? He was a boisterous gobshite throwing his weight about. David ignored him while he was merely working. One of his carpenters was directed by the boisterous gobshite to make him coffee. The carpenter vanished. The noisy gobshite kept prowling and grumbling about delays costing him a lot of money. The boisterous gobshite asked my pal a question 15 minutes after the carpenter vanished. "Where is that chippy with my coffee?" asked a noisy gobshite. Chippy = carpenter. Chippy = carpenter. "David, I'm not clear." "Go and find out," a noisy gobshite says. "David, I'm only here for this job," gesturing at the walls. "I work for ACC Limited, not for you." Noisy gobshite. "It makes no difference if you're an employee or a subcontractor. You still are working for me. Now go and locate my coffee." David. "First of all, I find it offensive to be spoken to like manners. Second, my contract with you is to do these walls, nothing else. I most definitely am not a gopher." Noisy gobshite. "Oh, do you not value being spoken to in such a manner? For which subcontractor do you now work?" David. "None. I run my business alone, just me." Noisy gobshite. "A day laborer. And you have the guts to address me in such a manner?" Do you know my name? David. Sure. Well, you're fired. A noisy gobshite says. Get out of the premises right away. David says, okay. Just get off the site, says a noisy gobshite. David grabbed out his phone and started recording. David. Okay, I'll leave. Just want evidence you advised me to leave. Grabbing David's hand containing the phone, a noisy gobshite yelled into the phone, Get off the site, you idiot, a noisy gobshite says. You're let off. I'll have you thrown out if you're still here in 10 minutes. David. Cool, not problematic. He took up his gear and left. The contractor's site manager passed him, ironically with a coffee for the boss, as he was leaving and smiled. Site manager. Dave, you're leaving early? Bloody part-time kidding. David, no, your boss just sacked me. We have signed out our contract. Apologies, friend. The site manager said, No. Allow me to arrange things here. Please wait, kindly. David left the site. Knowing something the boisterous gobshite lacked, the site manager was losing his head. In the UK, just 7 persons are certified to handle the task. Every one of them had a waiting list. David had been the only one accessible. 12 missed calls by the time he arrived home. That was Thursday, 2 working days absent so far. He claimed he would go back only if he was paid for the extra days and personally apologized to the employer. I met my friend as he was answering a call from the site manager, stating the boss apologies but is out of the country, so cannot apologize personally. David also informed me he warned the other specialist over the phone, but they had all been contacted on Friday asking to be assigned work. Nobody picked up the work. They were all booked full. To warn him, David also called the architect. Under such circumstances, some dishonest builders attempt to falsify the work and bodge the job. David is going to keep his guns, money for all missing days plus a face-to-face apologies. He is positive he will grasp it. I mentioned I would pay anything to see the in-person apologies. Update 1. The site manager called to inform David he was advised by the noisy gobshite to threaten legal action should David fail to complete his work. The site manager became really ashamed and apologetic. David reminded him he left and had documentation proving he was let go. The site manager called once more to inform the noisy gobshite will be personally apologizing on Friday. Could David begin tomorrow? David said no. Following the legal action threat, the criteria are different. Before work starts, a face-to-face apology. Additional compensation for lost days. Paying the whole contract value up front before work starts. All of this has to happen on Thursday. He can start today and still expect to finish before his next reservation. Should he work weekends as well, he has just enough time. I questioned him about why he isn't charging the man who is such a wanker a hefty extra fee. He remarked it's not the done thing to take advantage of businesses under time constraints, it looks bad. One of my pals apparently is a guy from the 18th century. Edit. When David mentioned just 7 others do this work, I misinterpreted him. He intended 7 different companies distinct from his own. Since they are small companies, he argues it is most likely just about 20 persons capable of doing it. Still a limited amount, although not as humorously tiny as 7. I apologies for misled all of you regarding the count. Update 2. Sadly, an apology appears unlikely. David has found that the site manager was sacked for not alerting the noisy gobshite of the circumstances earlier. David told the operations director for ACC Limited, the second noisy gobshite, that he would not be returning to the position so an apology is not needed. Apologizing for everything, the operations director promised to very liberally renegotiate the money. David informed him he had only thought about returning to the position as a personal courtesy to the original site manager. He feels no need to go back as he is not there. The operations director indicated he will contact David but omitted any explanation. Why he didn't say, give him his job back, or I won't come back, I wondered. David remarked the boisterous gobshite is too weak and petty to be guided by a craftsman. It will have to be the concept of the company for the site manager returning. They won't bring him back if I order them to. David thinks it's difficult to obtain a job at 61 since the site manager is excellent at his work but only 4 years from retirement. I have decided that David appeals to me even more than 3 days before. 3 updates. It is 2 in the morning here. We just came out of the bar. David answered a call from the dismissed site manager while we were out. David reported the circumstances to the architect this afternoon. The architect got in touch with the terminated site manager to let him know about a company needing a site manager. Just before 9 p.m., the dismissed site manager called David. I had to sit through the one-sided phone call. I had to have looked like I had a house full of sparrows, childishly thrilled. Then David filled in for me. The site manager rang to thank him and find out his preferred drink so he might bring him a bottle. He is seeing them on Friday even though he does not yet have the new job. The architect is hopeful since apparently his advice has some weight. David first rejected. David, I didn't not get you a job. The architect done. Site manager. But you told the architect I had been sacked because of you, therefore you set all this in motion. I never have to deal with that annoying Pillock ever once again. David left no clear identification for the irritable Pillock. We will have to conjecture. David mentioned his drink is Cardhu Gold Reserve. He declared he would only take a bottle if A. The site manager lands the new position. B. Should the site manager visit and sip the Cardhu with David. The whiskey consumption does not seem to include the attractive scribe who painstakingly and time-consumingly skillfully recorded this narrative down on Reddit. David elegantly said, "Piss off, knobhead, you can get your own drink." Except that nobody gets to see the tosspot noisy gobshite eat crow when he has to apologize. All excellent news ideally. I had great anticipation about that. David and the sacked site manager know each other outside of the office. Though two separate clubs, they are members of charitable organizations in the same location and cooperate extensively. David is Roundtable, whereas the site manager belongs to the Rotary Club. Though you never know, I doubt he is a knight. David was contacted by the operations director of ACC Limited to propose that they kindly renegotiate the money by bringing the site manager back. They have missed the boat, David says. He cannot finish the work on his own before beginning his next employment. Should all go without a hitch, there is an absolute minimum of 11 days labor left. David's next employment begins on November 4th. Assuming he works weekends, there are 10 days left. Last minute. I wish I could be a fly on the wall when the noisy gobshite is informed. Many people often ask, what does David do? If I said what it was, it would be quite identifying. I could as well tell you his actual name and address. Apologize. There are extremely few of them since it takes 5 years to become just competent and at least 9 years to be a master artisan. At least one master present is needed for the jobs done. Update 4, bad news. The site manager who was sacked did not land the other position. He met the new company, but they are not extending an invitation to him. The explanations are not obvious. David is seeing him Sunday to go over it. Though David is not at blame, I can sense he feels guilty about it. The site manager claims he will act regarding unjust firing. Though I imagine this would be a win-win-win, I suppose life isn't like that. News about the sacked site manager. The current state of affairs is not as dire as first assumed. We misinterpreted what transpired on Friday. David chatted with him yesterday. That aspect is accurate. The employer he visited on Friday is not hiring him in the usual manner. On a distribution center build, they have, however, presented him with a fixed-term contract spanning 18 months. Though not ideal, on the plus side it pays somewhat more than ACC. Though just 18 months, it is better than nothing. Should another project surface, the new business also has the option to extend the contract. David has heard that someone Bulgarian is visiting to cover for the work. David was grinning when he informed me. He believes he understands exactly what will happen. Some 19th century Sophian structures feature a comparable but different method that was used. David believes the man will apply such an approach. Though two extremely crucial elements are different, it looks comparable. David has opted to hold off. David is going to advise the client and the planning department to verify the two components. He intends to allow the Bulgarian to finish the job and get paid. The Bulgarian will have used the incorrect tools unless he is familiar with the English approach from the 17th century. It would mean pulling it apart and beginning over. They treat this kind of work quite rigorously. Though I hardly desire this, I truly hope this comes true. I'm a minor dude. More info. Many people are wondering when David would find out whether the Bulgarian performed the work as expected. Given that there are few vendors of one of the materials, David might know really quickly. Should the Bulgarian get in touch, David will be informed. David said, "It's a tiny incestuous part of the industry, and they gossip like old women." Correction. Like older women, we all gossip. David is leaving it alone till told the work is done and the Bulgarian is paid if he does not visit there. He wants not to jeopardize the man's money. David said, "I don't want the Bulgarian to drag his arse over here and go home empty-handed just because I can't wait to drop silly bollocks. The man has a living to support him. I'm going to wait. Silly bollocks is the same person as noisy gobshite just in case of uncertainty. Unless he works weekends, the Bulgarian should finish his job in 3 weeks. David will know when the work is done as he knows several people at ACC head office and several on site. I must thus wait on my hands for 3 to 4 weeks and appear to be a non-excited 7-year-old girl not complaining about Christmas approaching." Update 5. According to David, the Bulgarian got right to it and began working. Materials have been delivered, but from an ordinary building supplier. Though they sell it in Bulgaria, the items he requires for the work are too heavy for him to carry with him. He hasn't asked for it from the UK provider. 3. But only one has enough for this work since David brought it in for her. He is therefore not using the correct materials unless he is arriving by road and ferry. Though he was not bothered by raucous gobshite, David would not let it go unrecorded. He is a purist in terms of historical accuracy and truly enjoys maintaining all the structures he works on. I therefore have to hold my water for 3 to 4 weeks. David claims he might finish earlier if he uses more contemporary materials. If you stay in the 17th century, 3 weeks is the period. About this work, I have become such a weirdo. David knew I was after information after I phoned him earlier under cover of pretext. Do you want me to fit a body cam so you can watch and hear everything as it happens? David asked me. I answered, that would be great if it would not be too much trouble and you could link me into your phone calls. Laughing, David said, you knob cheese, is it okay if I cover the lens when I'm shagging my wife? Personal Ollie, I don't do those two things at the same time, but whatever floats your boat, I said. David, you are telling me you do them separately. Me? Right after she washed all the garbage off the sheets after doing you. A few of us are finicky. David said, piss off, you're an uptight clean freak. Hangs. Not farewell, not see you shortly. English behavior is not what it once was. Though I realize it doesn't look like it, really I do have a life. I never would have thought I would be typing Update 6 when I originally started working on this. Update 6 Many news stories. 2 weeks ago the Bulgarian completed his work and returned home. Those who met Stefan the Bulgarian said he was a decent man and a really diligent worker. He worked weekends and 12-hour days to help to offset the expenses of living in the UK. David is glad he waited until Stefan paid before he reported the work, knowing what he discovered about Stefan. David already felt rather certain Stefan was not performing as required. None of the 3 companies he checked, the sole UK suppliers of the most unusual substance involved in the job, said they had an order for the site. Stefan might have imported it of course, but nobody on site had seen an international material order. As scheduled, David thus made calls to the client, the architect, the local authority planning department and Historic England. He waited for them to investigate after outlining his worries in the simplest, least invasive manner possible. Though it just took a few days, I can really say that I have never been that nervous or committed in anything unrelated to my pissing business. The architect produced the first report on incorrect materials and technique applied. Not the English one demanded, he had applied a Bulgarian technique from the 19th century rather than the 17th. The architect was really agitated. David Avid stated this phone call was blue, but he had never heard the architect using foul words before. The architect apparently termed the boisterous gobshite, ignorant cockwomble. David defined a womble for me. I knew nothing. Approach is welcome. Not wanting people to believe this was anything to do with him, the architect said he was going to get in touch with the local authorities. Most of the remainder came to David's second or third hand. He knows some of the staff from ACC, I wanted to know whether it was challenging to get them to tell him anything. He mentioned they lacked the quick adequate phone pickup ability. The location was visited and the work examined by the local government planning officials. They informed the contractor that the work had to be cleared and corrected since it was totally improper. Then it became fascinating. Looking about the property, the inspectors discovered a problem. It would be too simple to pinpoint the buildings involved, hence I cannot be exact about this. The builder had wrecked some of the structure. Though it was not very significant, there was an internal feature included into the roof construction. Although they were not let to, they removed it and replaced it with a far superior modern support. The project manager, the new site manager, or staff member neither understood the significance. Who ordered it to be replaced with a cheap, quick alternative rather than the slow, expensive, rebuilt option? Of course, it was noisy gobshite. Destroying anything on this kind of property is illegal, jail sentence type of crime. It's a huge fine even if they avoid jail. Everyone in that company is thus pointing fingers at one another and claiming no accountability right now. According to Noisy Gobshite, he did not direct the internal roof structural components to be removed. The project manager has email proving he did. The client asked all of the contractor's employees off the site on Tuesday, the 19th. They are currently looking over everything. They're most definitely firing the contractor. They have written guidelines for bids from fresh contractors. They will also sue the contractor for the expenses of undoing and fixing all they have done improperly. The architect's projection came at £800,000. The local government planning department wrote to the contractor detailing their mistakes and alerting them of their intentions for inspection and the likelihood of prosecution. On the day the letter arrived, Noisy Gobshite vanished to the lawyers, claims the staff. Within an hour, David received 3 calls from 3 separate ACC phones as word of the letter spread around the workforce. Now we are awaiting a few things. 1. The client's checkup. Should that prove ACC has damaged the site, the client is entitled to terminate the contractor. ACC has a huge repair debt and does not get paid. 2. Local authority inspections conducted by conservationists. Should they have destroyed elements of the property, the local government will punish ACC as a company and the individual responsible. David is rather disappointed since it is impossible to rebuild the internal framework lost. That was sitting there performing its job for 400 years until that gist stain enters the picture, he said. It goes then, and that is it, never again. He comes across as really depressed. I'm guessing Noisy Gobshite is yearning he had his own coffee that day last month. Edit, the letter to ACC, not their actual name, did not threaten a prosecution. It simply made them aware of the intention of the planning department to send a professional to check the construction and, more especially, the changed area. Apparently, should prosecution take place, it takes eternity. My real apologies for misleading all of you. Like everyone else, I was overly eager to grab my pitchfork and start believing the worst. Wishful thinking mixed with Chinese whispers meant that the story was far more serious and advanced by the time it reached David. Though it's more likely to be in 6 months than in 6 days, Noisy Gobshite may well be prosecuted. Since I started, that represents the second correction. I promise to try to be a little more deliberate on next revisions. My error, not David's. David cautioned me that not everything that comes in your ears has to flow directly out of your tongue. You're very eager to feed the masses. Although they might believe you're currently farting rainbows, if you make a bollocks of the data, this won't last. Like always, he is correct. As uncomfortably customary. Information asked. A few have inquired about the fate of the sacked original site manager, but I wasn't sure until now. We met in the pub, David, the site manager, 2 others also. Subject to fidelity insurance checks, he most certainly has the new job. His starting date is February 9th. ACC paid him off in place of notice. Firing is done according to convention. They paid him just over 3.5 months' wages in one lump as his contract provided 3 months' notice and he was due 12 holiday/6/vacation days. He also gets to retain the car till March. I was shaking like a dog when he fired me, he added, but the wife reminded me that I could take my pension early and how much I hate that company, especially that dodgy pillage. I stopped worrying when the architect contacted me about the distribution center job. He started the new work on a somewhat better pay after landing it. The main drawback is that the employment is just guaranteed for 18 months. Although it's not certain, there's a great chance the organization will retain him following that if they have work. He first intended to bring Noisy Gobshite to an industrial tribunal for unjust dismissal. Now he won't since he won't suffer financially. Obviously, I'm glad I'm not losing money, he remarked, but I was looking forward to beating that Watson in court. He is building a better sleigh and several reindeer with the additional time right now. Certainly, a sleigh. It's on the rear of a truck. Father Christmas is on the sleigh performing Christmas carols at window-rattling volume, gathering money for charity while his company strolls the area decked as elves and snowmen. I have oftentimes been pulled into it. He brought David the promised whiskey. David advised he shouldn't, but the site manager remarked, "Why, Yorkshire men keep their word, even to a shower of soft shandy-sipping southerners like Ulan. Besides, I'm not risking breaking this lucky streak." Even the alcohol came at half price. Simultaneously pointing at him, David and I said, "A real Yorkshireman." For the uninitiated, Yorkshire residents are known for 2 things. Highly straightforward communication and financial restraint. We left the pub after ridiculing him for implying that I was a southerner and headed to the garage of the site manager so we could sip the whiskey and appreciate his sleigh building work. Would they send me some freebies if I told you all how great Cardhu Gold Reserve tastes? Born close to Carnarvon, Saeeglf, I'm Welsh and am sobbing in Bith, hence you have most likely seen some awful grammar. I'm full of whiskey, so right now I'm debating. It is past my bedtime. 1 a.m. Bye for now. Update 7. I believe there might be some karmic justice en route. Interviews under control have been conducted with Noisy Gobshite. It indicates they are ready for the possibility rather than that they are absolutely suing him. They will also do so with the sacked site manager next week. They also followed the same process with the project manager. The site manager is sure he has nothing to concern about. He was sacked, hence the decision was taken to remove the pieces of roof support. He added he was sure the noisy gobshite would have sought to assign culpability to a site manager if he had been present at the time of the illegal modification. He said, "That cowardly slope-shouldered turd would have shot all over me to save his own skin." Fortunately, the project manager has evidence in the form of an email proving noisy gobshite ordered the task. Noisy gobshite sought to convince him not to forward it on to the local authority planning department. He threatened him when that didn't work. That backfired when the project manager told the investigators that noisy gobshite instructed him to delete the email in addition to neglecting the risks. "My buddy, a lawyer, informs me that destroying evidence and meddling with a witness are crimes in of themselves. Noisy gobshite will not stop excavating a deeper hole. If he gets away without facing legal repercussions, I will be really let down. He is nevertheless clearly in pain." The major story of the week? Noisy gobshite has been let off. After learning from no less than 4 separate ACC workers, David announced it yesterday, Saturday. They eagerly wanted to tell him, he said. Then the discussion followed this pattern. Me? How is that feasible? How does the owner find himself let off? Did he stroll up to a mirror and declare, "You're as much use as Anne Frank's drum kit, you're fired"? David: Nope. You know he inherited the company from his uncle and dad. Me: Exactly. David said, "You know his brother and cousin own a slice each." Me: Anyway. David: They fired him since their combined share is over 50%. Louise, the accounts manager, told me they are pissing their pants. As long as the money came in, they were content to leave noisy gobshites in charge, but today their golden goose seems very sick. Losing this contract and the fees and penalties scares them since it will close the company. They therefore ask the customer owner to bring ACC back to complete the deal. Part of that is persuading the building owner that noisy gobshite has nothing bearing on the business. Clearly, they are putting noisy gobshite beneath the bus. According to Louise, a noisy gobshite fired at him with screaming and violent threats. He required escort off the property. He has been phoning staff members, posing queries, and acts shocked when individuals refuse to assist him. Louise claims he truly wants to be loyal to him and thinks the staff like him. The man is in cloud cuckoo land, she declared. Me? He will be really offended. I wish I could have seen the face of Numpty as it was developing. David says, "It's nothing that the scrot doesn't deserve. I promised the person who told me I wouldn't tell anyone yet, hence there is another, but I can't tell you about it." Me: You tease. What relevance does it have? David: It's significant. Transformational for the theme in life. Me: I wish I could tell you. It nearly gave me a hard-on. Me: Fing hell. It must be big if it can get that ugly appending to do anything except hang there like the last chicken in the shop. David: What a drama this is. She believes I should share with her this confidentially anything I learned. Given our marriage, she expects me to be able to tell her everything. I said it's not something I keep secret. Though I had hoped I would get, "I appreciate you have integrity, dear husband." No. Mrs. here is enraged since she believes I'm a knobhead. Louise's employment title and name have been changed to defend the innocent. I don't want any of you holding your breath. It looks like it will be a few months before he can provide me with this fantastic news. The building owner, client has completed their inspection. 2 portions are unacceptable, the damage section and the one David ought to have completed but Stefan did instead. They are rather unhappy. Usually, the local government believes it's the owner cutting corners when listed structures are harmed. In this instance though, the owner is an austere ancient institution committed to maintaining significant structures. They didn't enjoy having to establish they had nothing to do with the building's damage as they are not used to being accused of anything dubious. David stated it appears they have written off ACC since they have made a type of tendering request to multiple other firms specialized in conservation. Then he spewed a bunch of jargon I neither knew or recall. Me: They have asked a few firms to quote a price for the job in simple English. David says, "That's a very simplified way of describing it, but I don't have the time or the crayons to explain it to you." Me: Okay, let us say they are requesting job-related prices. Condescending, hence I was anticipating this tale would develop to a crescendo with noisy gobshites suffering something terrible. But it's just sort of faded with a whimper while we wait to find out what legal action will be pursued. Real life moves slowly, quite inconveniently. January 21, 2020. Hi there, this is Mark's wife. The moron requested me to apologize to the internet for his silence. On January 7th he was injured in an automobile accident. Though he won't be online for a little, we are confident he will fully recover. I explained it's only Reddit, but he's a compulsive freak about not disappointing others. I thus assured them I will include Reddit in the list. Here I am, informing all the folks he doesn't know why he hasn't finished imparting something they most likely aren't reading anyhow. March 2nd, 2020. Hello Mark, once more his wife. Direct messages numbered more than 200. I appreciate all of your remarks as well as your wishing of him well. I have read them all to him. I'll address the 3 most often asked questions. Mark's situation changed what? A big lorry drove straight into the rear of him while he was still stationary in his automobile about to exit the freeway. Between that lorry and the lorry ahead of Mark, his automobile was destroyed. Among his multiple shattered bones are nose, left orbital and cheekbone, left radius and ulna, forearm, left hand, right tibia and fibula, lower leg, and 4 ribs, one of which pierced his left lung. His left eye's center vision is somewhat damaged, however we hope this is transient. He needs more surgery since he has some tendon damage in his right hand and has 112 stitches overall. Though he looks like a wreck, he might heal free from any serious damage. If it were me, I wouldn't cope, but for as long as I have known him, he has always been as hard as nails. I went to pieces when I initially arrived at the hospital and he was lying there covered in blood, cables, and tubes and couldn't talk properly. In minutes, he had me giggling. He has always been really adept in knowing the appropriate response. Not being able to use his hands is the thing most bothering him right now. When ought he to change the narrative? It might take some time. Though I could ask the guy David contacted for an update, I most certainly cannot tell a narrative like Mark can. I'm obviously biased, but Mark seems to be the most entertaining man I have ever met. I start to laugh so much I cannot breathe as he and David get going. I have advised him to temporarily forget about everything but getting well. If it starts to disturb him though, I've told him I'll do some secretary role-playing and he may write the narrative to me. He will finish it. He always finishes what he starts on. I wish my self-discipline was 100th that of his. A few have inquired whether they might give him money, cards, or gifts to cover missed income or medical expenditures. Thank you so much for offering, but it's not necessary. As we live in the UK, fortunately healthcare is free. He wants none of anyone's money. There is a long-standing charity we have sponsored called Macmillan Cancer Support if anyone feels driven to do something. At last update, knowing who I am would help you. The David against boisterous gobshite narrative. The 22nd of May 2020. Slough mainly grunted, this username belonged to Mark, my spouse. He penned the narrative on his friend David and a company owner he referred to as noisy gobshite. Up until he was in a January vehicle accident, Mark had been updating the narrative. He requested me then to let everyone know he was hurt and to update the narrative after he recovered. Mark sadly died barely over a week after my previous comment. Everyone thought he was healing, but he passed out and died extremely rapidly without warning. Although the team did all they could to save him, his aorta had burst. They claimed it is not unusual in auto collisions and had most likely been damaged during the accident. Although I'm sorry I didn't update this earlier, to be honest I totally neglected this page. I discovered how many people were waiting for Mark to wrap up the narrative only after I returned to go over Mark's words once more. Though I'm not sure how many people will view this update, would you kindly forward this news to everyone you know who was waiting for Mark to respond? Many thanks. I appreciate the hundreds of people that posted get well notes for Mark. I'm sorry I ignored you all for so long. But for the past 3 months I've been bewildered. Mark would have chastised me and most certainly objected to my leaving everyone in uncertainty. Many thanks to the persons who sent Macmillan Cancer Support money. Though it seems odd to have money given in the name of mostly Gruntled. At last, I want to thank the moderators, especially /u/Marari01, for guiding me and outlining how I might notify everyone. Monday, May 24th, 2020. For the wonderful messages and virtual hugs I have seen over the past day, I am most grateful. For hours I have shed tears. One finds it difficult to define what good sobbing is when one loses someone. Those who have lost a loved one will most likely relate. Most of today has been good tears thanks to your postings and comments. Your thoughts have helped me to consider all of Mark's amazing traits and all the reasons I so much loved him. I began working on the update, then gave up around 8 times before mustering some fortitude. I am rather happy I did it. I appreciate once more the final small push I required from the moderator, /u/Marari01. It also helps me understand that I wish to undertake one more activity Mark would have liked. He consistently brought his starting work to completion. I will find out what has happened by talking to his buddies. I'll try to get myself current with everyone's outcomes. I know some of it already. I tell you ahead of time, it will be merely the facts, not like Mark's writing. Though I lack Mark's natural storytelling ability, the comments clearly indicate that many people were hoping for a resolution. The bare facts will have to be sufficient, please forgive. I'm going to talk to David, the guy he contacted. This year he has been a total rock for me. With luck, he will be able to cover all. As soon as I can, I'll input the change. I greatly appreciate it all. You are unaware of the extent this has benefited. Friday, May 25, 2020. Mostly because to what you all wrote, yesterday I had a better day. I woke up today enraged and cannot seem to calm myself. England observes a public holiday today, and I find myself wondering what we would be doing if Mark were here. He never threw a holiday away. I'm furious since, just because some self-serving moron couldn't wait to respond to a text message, I have lost the best person I have ever known in my life. I find the stupidity and unfairness intolerable. He will spend a few years behind bars. Not one thing though, will bring my Mark back. Sorry folks. I simply needed to let out a vent. Please, kindly, avoid using your phone while driving. Also, avoid tolerating it if you notice others doing it. March 6, 2020. I want to highlight 2 points. Firstly, let me thank everyone for their comments. The lovely things you have spoken about Mark have cheered me. It took so long to tell you Mark had died since I never imagined they would. Still, you did help, even though what you said was so poignant that I broke down hundreds of times reading the great words. Second, I'm sorry for not yet answering every comment. On some days I feel I could talk about Mark all day. On others, I cannot even think of him without going to pieces. If I haven't replied to your particular comment, it's not as though I haven't read all of them. Simply said, I can't respond as I have been in a poor state portion of the time. Eventually, I will answer to everyone, much as I did very slowly with the cards during his funeral. It looked like I was climbing a mountain that wouldn't stop expanding, but I finally answered all 322 of them even though I didn't think I would get through them all. One of numerous decent habits I picked up from Mark is finishing what I start. I only want to hear him once more calling me Carrot. Carrot is a Welsh term for love. My name is not Welsh. July 27, 2020 at 3:10 a.m. Whoa, I hadn't been online for a few days and now hundreds of messages show up. I can't sleep once more, and it came to me that I could change what happened to every one of the characters Mark had penned. It's just the facts. It won't have Mark's style or humor, it's just basic knowledge. Still, it's the most I can accomplish and more than nothing. Starting in the new post on a building project for a distribution center, site manager followed plans exactly. Mark had already mentioned what David and the site manager were dissatisfied about. Though that was before the coronavirus, being on a fixed 18-month contract as a self-employed individual was a drawback when compared to being an employee. Most of the staff were let go after the virus struck. Some were furloughed. The contract required the corporation to maintain paying the site manager whole. What he considered to be a negative aspect turned out to be a saving agent. The last David could tell me about Noisy Gobshite was that he no longer owns a third as he had to sell his part of the company under pressure. Regarding his assets, he had to sign a personal liability agreement in case total obligations exceeded the company's worth. According to what I understand of it, Noisy Gobshite must pay the extra, even if it means he loses his house, if for example, the total bills for his mistakes are higher than the company can pay. They couldn't continue trading if he was participating, hence he had to give up his part of the company. He needs them to carry on paying the attorneys. Though he hasn't been charged with a crime yet, he most certainly will. Something to do with wanting to be ready to go to court once he is charged. They take their time researching and being ready before they charge him. It also came to light that he warned of similar, but somewhat more minor, damage to a listed property in 2011. According to David, some anomalies found by the local government during the inquiry were forwarded to HMRC, the taxman. Also under investigation for that scam is Noisy. One of the first remarks on Mark's post was expensive cup of coffee, an understatement if ever I've seen one. The major headlines would be on Noisy Gobshite and the sexual assault, rape, of one of the PAs in the ACC headquarters in 2017 as well as sexual harassment of other employees. Though it wasn't boisterous Gobshite, the sexual assault occurred. It was former finance director. Stories of sexual harassment of female employees have not evolved and proved to be mere gossip. David. Working on his own and without social distance problems, he's most likely one of the few persons who were not impacted by the COVID-19 epidemic both financially and practically. He has carried on rather as normal. Job is easier, he stated. The usual plonkers are not there to trip on my equipment or stick plank ends into my finished work. David is not doing personally very well. David took Mark's death worse than anyone else outside his family. He tries not to show me this. He is a rock when he is with me. He has kept me from falling. Among 3 persons, he is the one I feel I can truly let go concerning Mark, or so I thought. David's wife was really nice and empathetic when I spoke with her last week, but she had to tell me to hold back a little with David. Although his wife claims he is shattering, he seems strong to me. She says he has taken Mark's death extremely severely. I thought he and Mark were close friends. She claims that in all their marriage, she only saw him cry once, that of their dog's death. When his parents deceased, she missed him crying. She notes he seems lost now and has sobbed quite a few times. The worst thing to find out is that his crying period falls after his visit with me. I'm awful. He obviously was mourning, but I had no idea I was burdening him so much. I'm going to cease venting all my suffering and be more cautious utilizing him. I wish he had said sooner. Maybe I should have known about it instead of being so self-servingly preoccupied with my own loss. That is as far as I'm aware of the updates cover. They are ready to observe his charged with noise. Should he be found guilty of damaging classified buildings, he might find himself imprisoned. Should he be found guilty of fraud, he will almost surely be imprisoned. In either case, the fines will be 6 figures. David mentioned wondering whether he would like prison coffee. His sense of humor is dark. July 27, 2020, at 3:10 a.m., there were alerts for 512 private messages and comments when I first arrived online earlier. I have no idea where to start. If you have written, kindly please not assume I am not appreciative as I have not responded. I felt fit to write at 3:10 a.m., hence I updated. Right now I doubt I could accomplish it. I have been staring at our weddings video. Though I believed it might help, I feel like a bus has knocked me down. I was devastated by Mark's speech. He discussed our meeting and his return to the house he shared with fellow Royal Marines. One among them asked Mark, "What's the joke then? You're once more smiling about something. Come on, what's so funny here?" Mark claimed he couldn't and wouldn't explain it to them, he just couldn't stop smiling every time he considered our date. Every time he thought of me, he claimed, he felt that. It made me grin and started me to cry on our wedding day, but this morning it broke me. I believe the agony is growing worse rather than becoming less. It bothers me too. All through me I feel it. I can't stop it. All I can think of lately is wish I had been in the car with him if I cannot have him back. Being an atheist, he always advised, this is all you get, so don't dare waste any of it. Therefore he wouldn't approve of me harming myself. It's just so difficult to keep going with this suffering. I doubt I can. I simply want it stopped. I apologize for carrying on like way. I would convey this to those I know since they worry, but writing here is like shouting into a diary. I apologize to all of you. Though I try to control things, I miss him so much and I can't stop it hurting. What should I do is unknown. August 31st, 2020 is. Although I responded to hundreds of messages since last updating this post, I did not get through all of them. Though the screen says I still have 92 waiting. I cannot see or read any more of the messages in chat. Should you not obtain a response, you fall into the 92. Our anniversary yesterday, August 30th, though I was looking forward it, when it came it was sort of empty. I cried when I viewed our wedding film. I replied to a few messages. Halfway through one message, I became abruptly overwhelmed with the knowledge that all the happiness I will ever experience in my life had already passed by. Every future endeavor I try will just be rewritten as Mark should be here but he isn't. Everything from here till I die is simply life. Just breathing and watching the days pass. Without Mark, it seems quite meaningless. I'm not sure whether I could write ever more. I appreciate all of you volunteering your time. You're really beautiful folks. Clutch the people you love like you might lose tomorrow. Avoid doing what I did and believe you could live in your own little heavenly bubble always. In the blink of an eye, some lazy morons can destroy all you love, leaving nothing ahead of you. Bye.